I'm going to spend some time discussing a complicated topic, and it involves the purchase of Treasury inflation-protected securities in the secondary market. These securities can also be bought at the periodic Treasury auctions. A Treasury inflation-protected bond adjusts the original principal amount of a bond sold at auction by the amount of inflation or deflation after the issuance. The coupon of the tip is paid on the adjusted principal amount every 6 months. The inflation adjustment to the principal amount is why the tip is commonly called an inflation-protected security. It is important to keep in mind a term called break-even inflation rate, which is the average annual CPI necessary for the buyer of the tip to break even with the buyer of the nominal treasury with the same maturity. The tip has to play catch up since it's starting out with a lower coupon than the nominal non-inflation protected treasury. The break-even inflation rate is also viewed as the market's prediction of the average annual inflation rate over the tip's maturity term. That number is calculated by subtracting the real yield from the nominal yield. The 10-year nominal treasury closed today at 4.14%. It has been trending up recently. The 10-year tip closed at a real yield of 1.8%. The break-even inflation rate was then 2.34%, the average annual CPI for the buyer of the tip with its 1.8% real yield to break even with the buyer of the non-inflation protected 10-year treasury with its 4.14% yield. If the average annual rate of inflation was 2.5%, I would be better off buying the tip, but worse off if the annual average inflation rate was 2%, below the break-even inflation rate. To give a concrete example, I went back in my confirmations to find a purchase of a tip that I had made in my Roth IRA account, and I found one tip that I had bought in the secondary market that will mature on April 15th, 2028. I bought it in late August of 2023. The price was then 96.422, or below the original principal amount prior to the inflation adjustments. And that is caused by the rise in the nominal yields occurring during the 2022 and for most of 2023. Since bonds are traded at 1/10 of the cost of this one bond purchase was 10 times 96.422, the price paid, or $964.22 as the principal amount that I had to pay for this one bond. The coupon is 1.25%, and that is equivalent to the a fixed rate for the I bond, and both are called the real yield. But since I bought this particular bond at less than its par value, my real yield, as shown on the confirmation that I received, was 2.065%, higher than the coupon because of the discounted price. The inflation factor, which is another important term that has to be understood when buying a tip, for this particular one was 1.017, 1.0171. The inflation factor adjusts the original principal amount by CPI. The seller of this tip is entitled to receive the adjusted principal amount from the buyer, me, plus the accrued interest that has not been paid on the bond. The principal amount paid to the seller is multiplied by this inflation factor, which increased the principal amount of this one bond that I bought to $980.71 from the 966.42. Also had to pay the seller $4.79 in accrued interest, which was for 138 days. The bond pays semi-annually. When that bond was purchased, the fixed rate on an I bond that can be bought from the Treasury, a savings bond, that it is adjusted for inflation, that day was 0.9% or 1.165% below the real yield of the TIP maturing in 2028 that I had purchased. So the TIP was a better buy for me than the I bond at that time. Both securities would adjust the principal amount by CPI, so the excess yield provided by the TIP will result from its higher real yield. Another difference in favor of the TIP purchase is that the TIP is easy to sell in the secondary market, which is highly liquid for these kind of Treasury securities. It can be sold without a penalty. An I bond cannot be sold within 1 year of purchase, and a 3 months of interest will be forfeited if sold within 5 years. Also, in 3 of my brokerage accounts, Fidelity, Schwab, and Vanguard, I can trade Treasury securities without paying the broker a commission. One advantage of the I bond is that taxes are deferred until the bond is sold or matures or ownership otherwise transfers. When a TIP is purchased in a taxable account, taxes are owed on the accretion each year to the principal amount that accrues from inflation, even if the bond is not sold. That issue keeps me from buying TIPS in a taxable account. I do not want to bother with that kind of accounting issue. That problem does not occur when I buy an I bond, since I simply defer all interest payments until I redeem the bond. The Treasury provides information in its website on how much the TIPS principal amount has increased to a particular day. I just entered at that page the CUSIP number of 9128CGW5 and saw that the inflation factor today was at 1.02474. As the nominal Treasury rate for a similar maturity has come down, the price of this TIP has gone up. One thing to keep in mind is that the significant up and down changes in nominal Treasuries with the same maturity will impact the price of the comparable maturity TIP. So TIPS had a bad year in 2022 and most of 2023 as nominal rates rose much higher.